A recent survey by Education Week asked school leaders in the U.S. about staffing, and about three-quarters said that they didn't have enough applicants to fill teacher jobs and other positions. But a new piece in The Atlantic took a look at the situation around the country and concluded, quote, there is no national teacher shortage. The writer argues it's more complicated than that.
Derek Thompson is here to discuss. Derek, what are you talking about? He's a staff writer at The Atlantic. He wrote the piece and can explain exactly what data really informs your position. I follow your tweets online. I'm a big fan of your work, so I'm hoping you're accurate with this, Derek. But let's just lay it out. What are the key factors at play in your report?
When you're looking at a national teacher shortage, what you're really asking, I think, is two questions. Number one is the vacancy rate of classroom teachers going up across the country. And number two, do we see that there are more and more students per teacher? And the answer to both of those questions for the moment seems to be no. There at the national level does not seem to be an unusual crisis of rising teacher vacancies or rising teacher turnovers. And we also see that because public school enrollment is declining because of demographic reasons, maybe because parents are taking their kids out of school for a variety of reasons. In fact, the number of students to teachers is actually going down. That tells me that what we're dealing with nationally is somewhat like the opposite of a shortage. It's actually that there's more of a student shortage rather than a teacher shortage. Now, I should say that, of course, in some districts and in some states, we are seeing a teacher shortage, but we have been seeing these kind of shortages for years and years, maybe for decades. And if there's nothing that the evidence is telling us that's special about 2022 that's different, except for this rash of headlines trying to make us think that there is a sudden, unusual national teacher shortage this year.
And Derek, I just want to quickly follow up on that because there were similar headlines around truck driver shortages, right? There had long been this shortage of truck drivers. Data was showing that more people were retiring, they weren't being replaced. And the argument from truck drivers was that, well, look, we're just not being paid enough. We'd love to take the jobs, but the conditions aren't there. Is that at play at all? Teacher compensation, or at least the conditions in which teachers are meant to teach?
This is a great question. And I think it's really important to separate chronic issues from acute issues. So there are some chronic issues here. Teachers are chronically exhausted. They're burned out. If you poll them, if you survey them, they're actually increasingly likely to say that they're burned out. I mean, teaching a classroom of 7-year-olds over Zoom is really, really hard. So, of course, it's reasonable that they should say that. At the same time, I don't see acute issues of teacher turnover across the country. And that's really what's at play here. When you have headlines at ABC, Washington Post, and a bunch of other national news organizations saying that there is an acute teacher shortage right now, you really need to look at the numbers and say, do we have any evidence that shows that teacher turnover rates are rising now compared to where they were the last few years? And we don't quite see that yet. So I'm not against pointing out that there are chronic issues with public school education in this country. I just want us to describe those issues a little bit more carefully than to simply say there's a national teacher shortage. We just don't have evidence for that claim.
So what is the danger, if you will, and that's probably a strong word, of using this sort of shorthand, that there's a teacher shortage crisis now versus a chronic condition that's been going on for a very long time? What is the danger of characterizing it that way? Because, you know, we're hearing in Florida, they are allowing veterans, you know, qualified veterans to teach. In some other states, they're looking to allow people who are just enrolled in college to teach. You know, shorten work weeks. There's sort of all these experiments that are happening, which it seems like if there isn't a shortage, we shouldn't need to go that far.
It's a great question. So what, right? So am I just being a stickler and there's no consequence of what I'm saying? I think it's a wonderful question. Here's what I would say. What we're looking at over the next decade is a situation where the number of students enrolled in public schools across the country is going to decline every single year. As a result, lots of districts across the country, lots of states across the country are going to have to change their funding formulas because right now a lot of public schools fund their schools on a per student basis. That seems more like a student shortage, so to speak, than a teacher shortage. So I want us to look reality squarely in the face and say, what really are the problems facing public school education over the next decade? I would say that there are two. We have a teacher burnout crisis where teachers arguably aren't being as effective because they're so burned out by the way that they're treated, by the way that their occupation has been politicized, and arguably by the way that they're paid. We have a teacher burnout crisis, and we also have declining public school enrollment. I don't think the best way to describe that is to say that there's a national teacher shortage. That does not at all cut to the heart of what's actually happening in public school education. So fundamentally, as a journalist, I want to describe reality as it's happening. I want to describe reality as I see it. And I think the consequence is you can't really solve a problem until you identify it. So I'm just trying to ask us in the media to identify this problem more accurately and to simply say that even in a situation where we have no evidence of national increase in turnover rates among teachers, we're going to just describe that as national teacher shortage. I don't think that's appropriate.
I think you're right. I think that it's our job to do the kind of work and not sort of rely on shorthand that we're being told by some other people that may have an agenda to really look at the numbers and say what's happening. Derek Thompson, thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.